Hello and a warm welcome to TVC News. Our top stories. 2025-2026 budget presented reignites hopes amid woes. Zanzibar eyes to be a hub at TVC Online. The government has allocated a national budget of 56.49 trillion Tanzanian shillings for the 2025-2026 financial year, marking an increase from 50.29 trillion shillings for the 2024-2025 financial year, which ends June 30th this year. Teddy Parnyanga reports.
Speaking in Parliament in Dodoma while presenting the national budget, Minister for Finance Dr. Mwigulu Nchemba announced that the new budget represents a significant rise from the previous 50.29 trillion shillings to 56.49 trillion shillings in the upcoming financial year. The new government budget also prioritizes Tanzania's development vision 2025 to 2050 and aims to increase the country's GDP growth rate from 5% in 2024-2025 to 6% in 2025-2026.
Speaker, katika muda wakati
Honorable Speaker, in 2024-25 budget, the government is estimated to collect a total of 50.29 trillion shillings from both domestic and external sources. As of May 2025, a total of 45.07 trillion shillings we collected, equivalent to 89.6% of the annual target.
Addressing Parliament and the nation, Dr. Nchemba reassures citizens that the government will continue implementing measures to ensure public debt remains sustainable.
Ni katika kuweka mazingira wezeshi ya uwekezaji wa sekta binafsi, kukuza uchumi, kusimamia kwa makini deni la serikali.
The government will continue to ensure that debt remains sustainable by implementing various strategies, including strengthening domestic revenue collection to reduce reliance on borrowing for budget financing, allocating commercial loan proceeds to projects that drives significant economic growth and promote exports of goods and services.
He also took the opportunity to urge Tanzanians to avoid hostility towards the country's security and defense forces, emphasizing the importance of national unity and cooperation.
Na vyombo vyetu vya ulinzi na usalama, Mheshimiwa Speaker, vilikomesha uhalifu wa aina hii.
If we continue to blame one another or blame our security and defense forces, we will give the enemy an opportunity to commit crimes. To effectively manage these challenges require strategic intelligence. Thus, I urge my fellow Tanzanians to let security and defense forces execute their duties.
The 2025-2026 budget marks a major step forward in the government's effort to build a resilient, inclusive, and sustainable economy.
Other East African countries have also presented their 2025-2026 budgets today, where the Kenya's Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Mbadi says the government projects to raise about 3.3 trillion Kenyan shillings in total revenue, including appropriations and aid for the 2025-2026 financial year, which is equivalent to 17.2% of the GDP. He adds that total expenditure is projected at 4.29 trillion Kenyan shillings, translating to 22% of the GDP.
Mr. Speaker, in this respect, the theme for this year's budget is stimulating sustainable economic recovery for improved livelihoods, job creation, and business and industrial prosperity in line with better. That is bottom-up economic transformation agenda. That is the theme. Mr. Speaker, as we move forward in the implementation of the government's agenda, we are also conscious of the fiscal constraints that demand our collective attention and thoughtful action. 1, rising demands for increased public spending, which could lead to either higher debt or the need to raise taxes, both of which require careful consideration and balanced decision-making given current public concerns.
Meanwhile, Uganda's Finance Minister Matia Kasaija says the government plans to spend 72.3 trillion Ugandan shillings in the 2025-2026 fiscal year on key national programs. He elaborates that the budget focuses on oil and gas activities as well as infrastructural development with the aim of increasing the country's GDP by 27.3 trillion Ugandan shillings.
And shillings 328.6 billion local government revenue. 3. Development expenditure 18.24 trillion. 4. Domestic debt for the financing shillings 10.03 trillion. 5. Debt amortization 4.98 trillion. 6. Domestic debt repayment to Bank of Uganda 493 billion. 7. Domestic arrears 1.4 trillion. 8. Local government expenditure from own revenue shillings 328.6 billion. Madam Speaker, I have attached the details of the resource envelope and the expenditure allocation by vote for financial year 25-26 as annexes 2 and 3.
Moreover, the Minister of Finance and Economic Planning of Rwanda, Yusuf Murangwa, explains that the government plans to spend 7 trillion Rwandan franc in the 2025-2026 fiscal year, with key priorities including the construction of a new airport in Bugesera, investment in the education sector, and efforts to enhance electro connectivity. Now, to discuss more on the budget estimates presented today in the Tanzanian Parliament, we are joined live by renowned economic and international affairs analyst Dr. Bravius Kahyoza and political analyst Novatus Igosha. Gentlemen, welcome to TBC News.
I'm profoundly honored being with you.
So today, Dr. Mwigulu Nchemba, the Minister of Finance, has tabled the budget estimates. How would you summarize? Because a lot has been said. Virtually all sectors of the economy have been touched. How would you summarize the proposed budget? Let's start with Dr. Kahyoza.
I think it was a very interesting submission from the Minister of Finance, Dr. Mwigulu Nchemba. And it's very important to put this in light. The budget is both an economic tool on one side and the political tool on the other. If you listened to him very carefully, he had spent almost 40 minutes to deal with the political side of the budget. And then he spent the rest of the time on the economy. And that was very, very important because without the political side of it, of the budget, there's no economic side of that. So the budget is the one that connects politics and economics in that stance. But two, in the way he has managed to integrate other political, economic, social affairs in the budget, as the famous 20th century economist taught us that the best economist is the one who knows philosophy, politics, history, and the rest. And the good minister was able to bring that out. The other thing I think I would have to highlight is that it is a budget which is centering on the third 5-year development plan, 2021-22, 2025-2026, which mainly focus on three main issues. One is competitiveness of the economy, 2, industrialization, and 3, inclusivity of the economy. And these things were put out very clearly. And I think as we dissect much deeper into the budget itself, we'll try to showcase the lines where the Mwananchi, the business people, the international community, the private sector at large has been touched in the way that I have seen the budget.
Igosha, what is your take?
Thank you. My take will be a little bit brief, but to start, I'd say that the budget is the heart of the broader national interest matrix, to mean that it is the fiscal roadmap towards Economic Development Plan 2025-2026, because whether you speak of our ambition as a country in agriculture or healthy or defense, foreign policy, the denominator is the money, how much we allocate resources into delivering to the people. Now, when you listen to the parent ministerial budgetary delivery today, it was about 50.1 trillion Tanzanian shillings target, where domestic collection is targeted to be 34.1 trillion, and from other sectors, especially international donors, 1 trillion. To me, this is a pivot towards economic sovereignty, because if you were following the budget, even the commander-in-chief, the president herself, was following virtually by virtue of Article 92 of the Constitution. She was part of the parliament today. Now, from my own analysis, this, number one, gives confidence to investors that Tanzania is right now going to be sustainable in the next 5 years development plan. But on the other hand, it also shows sustainability in terms of equity towards the small businesses, both private and public, but also integration of employment ecosystems, whether government organizations or informal sector. But it's a budget also which prioritizes agriculture. And agriculture, as you know, is the heart of our economy, because there is about 757 billion Tanzanian shillings allocated, and this is in order to give more to the farmers. If you remember, specifically back into the manifesto, which is directly connected to the budget, you would find that the government also has subsidized agriculture equipment, but also fertilizer. So generally, I think it is a budget which gives confidence not only to the Mwananchi, to use the experts' statement, but also to investors, that the country is going to put allocation and delivery of services not only to its domestic market and constituencies, but to the broader economy as far as foreign investment is concerned. And I was very much proud of Dr. Nchemba when he also emphasized so much on unity, because at the end of the day, stability is the whole ball game what investors are watching when it comes to any investment in any country of the world.
Yeah, I want Dr. Kahioza to echo on the issue of prioritization of the locals so that they also benefit from their endowments. Can you elaborate how, by action, this budget estimates really prioritize the local people?
I think it has done so. And in a way, if you listen to the minister, he has espoused what I was the first person to call, when the president got into power, to call his economic ideology the Sammianomics theory. And I think if you listened very carefully, the minister mentioned a lot of issues pertaining to the locals in terms of how our endowments could benefit the Tanzanians. And there are three areas to look at it. Number one is that the budget itself is giving a lot of relief in terms of tax exemptions and zero rating of VAT on internal or domestic manufacturers, from trade to investment to manufacturing and the likes. Number two is the way the government is trying to implement the blueprint, the business blueprint, that is fostering, of course, not only attracting foreign direct investment that has been hiking, but also to make the connection between the domestic, between the foreign direct investments on one side and the domestic investment on the other. Because when FDIs are increasing, you have to look on the other side of the matrix, that is the DDIs, the domestic direct investments, and that has been happening. Number three, I think is very important to note, my friend has talked about agriculture, I think it's very important. When this president came to power, the budget for agriculture was below 300 billion shillings. And within 4 years, it has increased to more than 1.01 trillion Tanzanian shillings. That is almost 5 times more than she found it. And that's very important because if you look at the matrix of our economy, you find that agriculture plays almost 70% of every value addition in any sector of the economy. And that has been espoused. Lastly, I think in terms of building the economy for Tanzania and for the Tanzanians, the clarion call for the president has been, how do we turn these natural resources into economic resources? Because we have been saying we are endowed with a lot of resources here. But the question has been, how do we make these resources beneficial, profitable to the people? And it has come out very, very, very clear that the budget intends, of course, to make these resources, to utilize these resources, not from the natural perspective, but to the economic sense of it, in a way that they will produce manufactured goods. And I think that is very, very, very important. Lastly, on the footnote, because I've said my last point, is that when you look at the economy in terms of the macroeconomic variables, that's very important to note in terms of how you want to make people own the economy. 3 most important things have come out. 1 is that it will keep on targeting inflation below 5%, because we have been trading at 3, 4, or 2% there. I mean, the range has been on that range. Budgetary deficit has remained below 4%, which is very good because when the budget deficit increases, it affects the people, thereby creating the fiscal hole in terms of their pockets. And then the growth of the economy, that is projected to be 6-point-something%, which is very, very, very impressive. And that conjoined, of course, with the political side of it, when he said that it is very important to make sure that we will maintain peace. And remember, let's tell our followers, since 1776, when the father of modern economics wrote the book, The Wealth of the Nations, one line was very clear, and I've seen it today. He said, little else is required to move the state, or to carry the state to the highest degree of opulence from the lowest of barbarism, but peace, justice, and easy taxes. And this budget summarizes that in a very effective way.
Given the current geopolitical environment, how do you think the budget has placed emphasis on rational revenue collection? Because also the government intends to be more independent in that aspect. Igosha.
Thank you. I'd like to quote one of the rational geopolitical people of the former Soviet Union, Leo Tolstoy, who once said to sell the future is more difficult than to sail the ocean, because the future is complex. There is nothing there. Now, to come back to the budget, given the trade gambit between the 2 largest economies, the United States of America and the People's Republic of China, I think this budget completely touches the person on the grassroots. And I'll explain. If you remember the presentation of the budget, the minister said that this budget is going to prioritize one of the key sectors, that is health sector. And right now, across the country, we have a lot of health centers that have been built and over 9 referral hospitals. But he said there are more than 40 CT scan sophisticated equipment. Now, how are we going to balance this? Number 1, I think the electronic billing system, which is coming over to integrate the systems of financial collection, and that is going to reduce red tapes and ways where corruption can be dished out. But I also think Tanzania is trying to show not only its citizens, but also the rest of the region that Africa can stand on its 2 feet. Now, to remember what the expert was saying here, that how do we move from only resources to a better economic budgetary factor? I think when it comes, for example, for agriculture, I think it is the time we have to move from subsistence farming and subsistence agriculture to a more digital, at the same time industrial agriculture, because the world has completely changed. We've got partners, and this is the time where we can integrate our economies, we can integrate our markets in terms of regulations, not only in Tanzania, but as far as the budget of other countries were also read, Uganda, Kenya, and the greater East African and perhaps SADC region. Now, as far as the rest of the world, I think we need also to get some technology. But at the end of the day, we need investors also to come and invest here so that we can be able to add value to what we produce.
Dr. Kayoza, any take on that?
I think that he has brought out a very important topic on productivity. For the last 10 or so years, Tanzania's productivity growth has been it has been stagnating, actually. If you look at the budget today, it is trying to revert that aspect of the economy. In economic terms, we call it the total factor productivity, and it has not been doing very well. But if you invest a lot in agriculture, as he has ably explained, I think that brings more impetus in terms of turning around that aspect. But I would like to put another important point in this budget, in comparative terms, because you have mentioned when you are reading the bullets, you said about Kenya, Uganda, and ours. And now, one thing is very clear. If you have to look at the budgets of these countries in East Africa, Tanzania is ahead in 3 principles in those budgets. One is if you look at the per capita revenue, because you asked about the revenue mobilization, the per capita revenue in the country, in the last 4 years, Tanzanian per capita revenue has increased by 6.2%. The Kenya per capita revenue has grown by 4.2%, and Uganda has grown by 4.1%. So Tanzania is leading. And looking at the budget, it won't be any different, because the trajectory, if you have to compare the budgets, Tanzania will remain ahead by about 1% or so. If you have to look at the per capita income, yes, Kenya is ahead in terms of the per capita income. In terms of reducing the gap, in the last 4 years, Tanzania has reduced the gap between her counterpart by 56% before than it was in 2000 and in 2021 when the president was getting to power. And then the third aspect that is very critical is the per capita spending, especially on social services, education, health, water, and the rest. Remember, before the budget reading the afternoon, there was there was the statement from the Minister of Investment that was showing the direction of the economy and how Tanzania has been performing. And he mentioned, of course, brought out the aspect that because of the investment that Tanzania has done in terms of human development, from education, from health, and the rest, there's a correlation between how much people have been spending for their pockets that has been served by the government investing in those areas. Now, if you look at that aspect of per capita spending, Tanzanian budget is ahead by 2.3% of its peers in the region. What does that tell you? It tells you that Tanzania is investing more in people. And that does not go away from what international organizations have been saying. The World Economic Forum, for example, has been mentioning how Tanzania is building its economy in terms of equality and the equity matters. And in this budget, that has come out very, very clearly. Of course, one thing that we have to work hard on is on the debt increase. I think the president has also cautioned before, and the way the increment of the ballooning of the public debt, of course, is still sustainable if you have to look at the correlation. But 2 aspects are important. I think the minister and the experts within our economic sphere should look at it. One is that if you have the tax to GDP ratio hovering around 12 to 13%, that is not enough, because we have been there for the last 13 years.
What are the ways in which a country can actually reduce the debt, the national debt?
I think one is, there are good proposals to expand the tax base. That's very, very important. But I think one critical important is the technical one. If you have to look at the relationship between the public debt and GDP growth, it doesn't give you a clear measure, because at one point you may increase GDP humongously, but on the other side you find that taxes have not increased so much. That has happened. When President Samia came into power, our GDP was around $63 billion. It has increased by almost 25 billion. It is around 85, 87, depending on which data you're looking at. So you could see, in terms of GDP, we have grown so fast. In terms of tax to GDP ratio, it hasn't changed so much. You have only 1% of that. So it's very important to look at that. What is happening in there? Yes, we're investing a lot in infrastructure, investing a lot in social services, a lot in maintaining whatever has to make our economy grow. But it's very important to look at the technical part. Lastly, it's very important to look at our metrics of export and imports. Yeah, we are exporting, but we're exporting raw materials. Of course, one is being answered by the budget itself, that we want to catalyze industrialization. But look at, because when you import, most are importing capital goods. So what we are saying, essentially, technically, is that what you are borrowing is not money, actually. You are borrowing capital from different parts of the world. So what to do there inside is to make sure that the productive parts of the economy have to be fed enough, not only in terms of man resources, but in terms of capital. Capital as a means of production. Yes, we are doing it in agriculture, but we have to ask the question, where are our people? The question shouldn't be, where are our sectors? The question should be, where are our people? I think that's the question that the president has been asking. And I have to put this clear. The president has asked the question directly. She has given 34 public economic speeches since he got into power. Out of those, 3 have been direct. What other countries have done that we haven't done to make our people get out of poverty? I think in answering that question, it is very important to look at the technical part on how we look at our economy in terms of transformation and not only in terms of growth.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kahioza. I still have tons of questions because the budget has been contains a lot of content, but for the sake of time, we have to end there. Thank you very much to the both of you. Now, before we wind up the news bulletin for tonight, let's take a look at the weather forecast for the next 24 hours.
Viewers, and thank you for joining us for the next 24 weather forecast. By searching within the patterns, tomorrow we saw the moderate wind of 30 kilometers per hour for Lake Victoria, Lake Tanganyika together with Lake Nyasa, and a strong wind of 50 kilometers per hour for the entire coast. And the state of the sea is expected to be rough. The Meteorological Authority is issuing a warning of a period of strong winds exceeding 40 kilometers per hour and large waves exceeding 2 meters are expected over some areas of the entire coast. So precautive measures should be taken. And landfall models are still portraying the reduction of activities over most parts of the country. And cool temperatures are still expected over most parts of the country, with raised minimum temperature of 9 degrees at Njombe region. So that for tonight we expect the entire country to feature its particular conditions. And for tomorrow we expect Tanga region together with Unguja and Pemba ISOs are expected to feature its particular condition, light rain showers over a few areas and sun periods. And for the rest part of the country, are expected to feature its particular condition and sun periods. Let us see next 4 days forecast from different cities and regions. Dar es Salaam minimum temperature is expected to be 22 degrees. Dodoma minimum temperature is expected to be 15 degrees. Mbeya minimum temperature is expected to be 10 degrees. Mwanza minimum temperature is expected to be 19 degrees. Kilimanjaro minimum temperature is expected to be 17 degrees. Morogoro minimum temperature is expected to be 16 degrees. Arusha minimum temperature is expected to be 13 degrees. I'm Rebecca William from Tazama Meteorological Authority. Thank you.
And on that note, we're ending our news bulletin for tonight. But don't miss our next bulletin in Kiswahili at 11 p.m. I am Faitha Ngaga. Good night.
mmoja huja na matarajio yake. Huo ndio uhalisia. Na tunapofika katika ulimwengu huu, pale tunapoanza kujitambua, sina shaka kila mmoja wetu kuwa na ndoto yake. Na hata ukimuuliza mtoto mdogo, jibu lake ni ndoto inaong'aa na kuhitaji mafanikio tele. Utasikia mimi napenda kuwa daktari. Wapo wenye ndoto ya uhandisi, marubani wa kemia na hata wenye kiu ya kuwa viongozi wakubwa katika serikali zao. Nyanja zote zimebeba ndoto za watoto. Wapo waliojaliwa vipawa mbalimbali wangali wadogo, kiu yao ni patia burudani na tukaburudika kweli kweli.
Na ndoto yangu hapa nataka kuja kuwa daktari.
Ndoto yangu ni kuwa nahodha wa meli.
Ndoto yangu kubwa ni kuwa rubani. Mimi binafsi nina ndoto ya kuwa daktari ambaye amespecialize katika field ya medicine kiprofessionally, anaitwa internist au internal medicine physician.
Hivi vyote vikizaa matunda katika umri sahihi ni jambo la kujivunia, na ikiwa vinginevyo huleta maswali, madhila na hata madhara.